Hello, hello. Once again. You're welcome to Western University, and today we're looking at chapter 8, part 3, and this is the introduction to switch configuration. Okay, introduction to switch configuration. Without much ado, let's begin. Now, for switch, in order for us to configure the switch, we will start by configuring a switch. And if you want to configure a switch, this will require that the privilege mode be entered on the switch first. The first thing to do is to put the switch on the privilege mode. The first thing to do is to put the switch on the privilege mode. Is that okay? So if you want to configure a switch, or you want to configure the interfaces on the switch, the first thing you do is to put the switch on the privilege mode. And then after that, the privileged execute mode, also called the enable mode, allows us to have full access for configuring the switch ports and enabling the VLAN also, or for establishing the VLAN. So once you put it in the privileged execute mode, just like we did in router in chapter 7, then we'll be able to have access, full access. We'll be able to have full access Okay, sorry. One trying to see if we can take the highlighter. Then you'll be able to have full access to the entire switch. You'll be able to have full access to the entire switch. You'll be able to do all the configurations that you want to do. You'll be able to do all the configuration that you want to do. Okay. So once you are able to have access to the privileged execute mode, this privileged execute mode is also called this privileged execute mode is also called the enable mode. Okay, and once you reach this enable mode, this will allow full access for configuring the switch, all the switch ports, and also you'll be able to establish the VLAN. Okay, now here are the configuration procedures or configuration techniques. So the first thing we do is enter the privileged execute mode. And to do that, you say switch, you put the greater sign in front of switch. Once you do that, you are in the enable mode. Once you type switch in the command interface of the computer, you put switch greater than, then you will be in the enabled mode, or in the enabled privileged execute mode. And then you can put password, switch, hashtag. So you put switch hashtag. Once you type switch hashtag, it means it puts you in the execute mode. You can type or configure any other thing afterwards. Now enter the configuration mode. You put switch hashtag config terminal. So you configure the terminal first, the hyper terminal. You configure it first. So you type this command by saying switch hashtag config terminal. Switch hashtag config terminal. So you say switch hashtag config terminal. You enter this in the privileged execute mode. Now then you enter the configuration command one by one, line by line. Okay, step by step, line by line, and then you end with Control Z. Okay, Control/Z. Then you put switch config hashtag. Okay, once you put it in a switch config hashtag, meaning you are in the configuration mode, you can configure anything on the switch interface. Now changing the host name. If you want to change the host name, you write switch config hashtag host name switch A. So it used to be called switch. Now you want the name to be switch A or switch 1 or switch B or switch whatever you want to call it. So you just type in the command line interface, you type switch config hashtag host name switch A. You must type that switch, the name you want, switch A. So then you end by saying switch A hashtag. Okay, you now end by saying switch A hashtag. Then if you want to configure the enable secret means the password. When we say enable secret, it means we're saying that you should configure the password. So you say switch A config terminal, switch A config hashtag, switch A config hashtag, enable secret. So you now put switch A hashtag, the last part, enables secret my secret. So my secret is the password. That's enable secret, my secret. So my secret is the password. So if you want the password to be maybe Monday, you say enable secret, then Monday. You put Monday here. Okay, so you say switch A config hashtag enable secret. You put whatever password. If you want 1 2 3 4, you say switch A config hashtag enable switch enable secret 1 2 3 4. So whatever you put here now determines what the password is. Is that okay? So these are the switch configuration mode, and the first one is entry the privilege execute mode, which is switch greater than enable. You type switch greater than enable. So once you do this switch greater than enable, you put it in the enable execute. Then you follow it with the password, and you follow it with switch hashtag. So once you reach the switch hashtag, you're now in the privilege execute mode. Remember, we have the privilege mode, which is this first one. And then you have what we call the privilege execute mode, which is this one, switch hashtag. So once you're here, you can now configure the interface. Now the next one is enter the configuration mode by saying switch hashtag config terminal. You are now entering the configuration mode. Config the terminal, then you say enter the command line step by step as you want them, and then you end with the switch config hashtag. Then changing the host name, you say you put switch config hashtag with the host name switch A, meaning you saying the host name should be switch A. There you end with switch A hashtag. Configuring the enable secret, you say switch A hashtag config terminal switch A config hashtag, then switch A config hashtag enable secret, then you put my secret. My secret is this password, for instance. Okay, so we move to the next one. So still on switch configuration. Layer 3 access, like layer 3 are usually like the routers. Okay, routers are layer 3 devices. Layer 3 access to the switch is set by using the following command. Okay, so these are the commands you have to set in order for the layer 3 to access your switch. Like I said, layer 3s are like the routers. Note that the IP address is being set for VLAN 1, VLAN virtual local area network 1. Okay, now the interface for the switch is also enabled at the same point using the no shutdown. No shutdown, you say the device should remain active, the device should not close down or shut down. So you have to follow it up, whatever you write on the command line interface, you have to follow it up with the no shutdown command. So once you follow it up with no shutdown command, then the system will be active and will not shut down. So this is what follows. If you say, for example, switch A config hashtag interface VLAN 1, so you're configuring the interface now, the VLAN interface. So now you're configuring the VLAN. Okay, the other ones we did were the password and every other introductory part. Now you say switch A because you've named the device as switch A now. No more just switch. You've called this switch A. So remember that was the first configuration we did in the first executive mode. So you say switch A config hashtag command VLAN 1 interface VLAN 1 interface VLAN 1. Then switch A config interface. This IF is interface. So these are the command that you write on the command line interface for configuring the switch. Switch A config interface hashtag the IP address. Then you put 172.60.2.2 there. Then you follow with the subnet mask 255.255.255.255.0. So the subnet mask has to go with the IP address. Okay. So this means you've entered the IP address for the next one. After the interface, you must put the IP address for the interface for the VLAN. Okay. Then you follow with switch A config interface no shutdown. No shutdown means this interface should continue to be active. Should not be run down. Should be active. Okay. As long as this thing is in use, should be active. Okay. So these are the three things you follow up. You follow it up in order to access the router. So if you want the interface to access the router, you must configure the interface VLAN 1, and then the switch A config interface. You put the IP address, and then you put no shutdown. So it will continue to be able to access the layer 3 devices such as router. Now let's go to configuration. Still on configuration. Now let's look at when you configure the gateway, the default gateway. So the default gateway for the switch can be set using this command. The default gateway instructs the switch where to forward the data packet if there isn't any specific route that the data packet is meant for. If there is no any specific route defined in the switch for the data packet, so the default gateway is where the such packet will go to. You know, even in the banking sector or claimed accounts, there are accounts that are designated for claimed money. There's some money that nobody, maybe the owner died, they didn't tell their family members. There's nobody coming forward for such accounts. Okay, so a claimed account, we open or claimed account, we move such money that has been inactive for 10 years or for 5 years, depending on the specific time of the bank. So they move such money to such accounts. So similarly, that's what we do here. So when you configure your switch, there are data packets that will not find the specific route. They're not designated for specific route on the switch. So those data packets, you have to configure a default gateway so for those packets to route to be sent to. So if you configure any default gateway, this is what you do. So you say switch A, config, like config means configuration, hashtag IP default gateway. You set the IP for the default gateway, the IP address for the default gateway 172.60.35.1. So meaning this is ready for any data packet. So once you set it, once you configure this default gateway, then there are data packets that do not have specific route or specific destination on the switch or the ports on the switch. They will be sent to this default gateway. Now the configuration settings that are on the VLAN 1 interface can be viewed by everything that you've put on the VLAN 1 interface, the one we've done, can be viewed by entering a specific command. If you want to see what you have entered, you say switch A hashtag show interface VLAN 1. This is a command you have to enter if you want to see what you have there configured. If you want to see what you have configured with regards to the interface of the VLAN, so this is what the command you enter on your command line interface. You say switch A hashtag show interface VLAN 1. So once you type this command on the command line interface, then it will run, it will show you everything that you have configured on the switch regarding the interface VLAN 1. Now VLAN, we move on to the VLAN configuration. You know, we'll be talking about the switch configuration. Now we move it to the VLAN, virtual local area network configuration. So in order to establish a VLAN, the first thing you have to do is to determine a hyperterminal connection to the switch. You have to establish a hyperterminal connection to the switch. And to do that, the switch initial prompt should appear as switch greater than. This switch greater than that we talk, the initial prompt. After the initial prompt, the next prompt should be switch hashtag. Because this is the privilege mode, then this is the privilege execute mode. Okay? The first one, the greater than, is the privilege mode. The second one is the privilege execute mode. That's what we call the switch hashtag. Now this allows you to enter the privilege mode of the switch once you do this. Then the next one is to configure the terminal, or you enter the config T. That's what we call the configure terminal. Configure the terminal. Once this is done, the prop should change to switch config hashtag. So once you type in the config T in the command line interface, then the prompt will change to switch config hashtag. It will change to switch config hashtag. It means now you are in the terminal, in the configuration terminal, where you can configure, enter any other thing that you want to do. This is where you do all your work. Once you are in this prompt has changed to switch config hashtag, then you can stylishly be configuring anything that you want to configure. Excuse me. Still on VLAN configuration, the third step, now you type the interface VLAN 1 or inter VLAN 1, then the prompt should now change to switch config IF. This IF, like I said, is interface. Switch config interface hashtag. So once you this one means that you have configured the interface. This is the third step. Remember, the first step is the privilege mode, switch greater than. The prompt will change to switch greater than. Then the second one is switch hashtag. The prompt will change to switch hashtag. and then you follow it with the switch config hashtag. Okay, switch config hashtag. That's the second step, right? That's the second step. The first step is actually the switch hashtag. Okay, but first, before you can reach the switch hashtag, you have to put the switch greater than. So that you reach that way the prop will become what? The switch hashtag. Once that is done, you put switch config hashtag. That's the second step. That means you configure the terminal. The third step is to enter the VLAN interface VLAN 1. Okay, then the prompt will now change to switch config if hashtag. That means interface. Switch config interface hashtag. The first step is to enter the IP address. Okay, the prop will now change to IP 192. You put the IP address that you want, 192.168.1.1. Then you follow with the subnet mask 255.255.255.0. This command changes the switch IP address to 192.168.1.1. Okay, the IP address is now changed to 192.168.1.1. Okay, then we follow with no shutdown. Okay, type no shut. This is needed in order for the VLAN to stay up and active if you don't want it to close or shut down. So you put no shutdown or no shut. Follow it with the fifth command is to follow on the command line interface to type no shut. Once you type no shut, then it will make it active. Still on VLAN configuration, you have now set the IP address. Once you enter the 192.168.1.1.255.255.255.0, then you set the IP address of the switch to 192.168.1.1. The subnet mask is set to 255.255.255.255.0, which places the switch in the 192.168.1.0 network. Now the IP address is set for VLAN because this is the default administrative VLAN for the switch and it can never be removed. So please take note of this. The IP address is set for the VLAN. Wait, let's highlight that. We say the IP address is set for the VLAN because this particular IP address that we mentioned, 192.168, this one, 192.168.1.1 with a subnet mask followed with 155.255.255.255.0. So once that is done, we say the IP address is set for the VLAN, the virtual local area network 1, because this is the default administrative VLAN. You know, there is a default administrative VLAN for the administrative department, for the IT department. Before you set the VLANs for sales, the VLAN for engineering, VLAN for marketing, VLANs for any other VLAN that you want to set, you must configure the administrative VLAN first before you configure the other VLANs. So you enter this IP address to configure the administrative VLAN for the switch. Okay, for the switch. And it can never be removed. This is the administrative VLAN, it can never be removed. Now the workstation should be connected to ports 1 on the switch, and the computer's IP address should be configured to 192.168.1.2. Okay, .2 now. Because we have .1.1 as our default gateway for the IP address. So the next computer on this IP address will be .2. Okay? So this places the computer in the same network as that defined for the VLAN interface. The VLAN interface that the default, the VLAN interface is the administrative VLAN. Okay, so any computer here is on the same interface with that. So you have a computer that can work with that interface. Okay. Now at this point, you use the ping command to verify network connectivity from the computers to the switch. You use what we call the ping command to verify the connectivity, the network connectivity. Now, to do that, or the step to take is to use the show VLAN command to verify the ports have defined for the switch, or the port that you have defined or that you have configured for the switch. So you use this the show VLAN command to show all the ports, to run down everything that you have defined for the switch. So by default, all ports are assigned to VLAN 1 at the moment. All ports are assigned to VLAN 1. So an example using the show VLAN command is provided. Look at it. Show VLAN. Say switch hashtag show VLAN. So once you run this command, once you type in this command, then it will give us all this information. Switch hashtag show VLAN. It will run down. First of all, it's telling us it's VLAN 1. So it's a VLAN 1, and it's a default one. And the status is that it's active. And these are the ports, the fast Ethernet interface with their slot and their port number. Fast Ethernet slot 1, port 1, slot 0, port 1, slot 0, port 2, slot 0, port 3, slot 0, like that. Okay, so up to 10. So this shows that all of the fast Ethernet interface are currently assigned to VLAN 1. They are all in VLAN 1. All of this fast Ethernet interface, they are all connected to VLAN 1. That's what you've configured. Now, in the next step, 2 additional VLAN can be created. Maybe one for sales department, another VLAN for engineering department. If you like, you can do more. So this is accomplished modifying the VLAN database as shown in the step. So if you want to create another VLAN, okay, not another VLAN, maybe VLAN 2. Remember, the VLAN 1 is the default VLAN for the IT people, for the administrative department, for the IT department. Okay, now we are creating VLAN 2. So to create VLAN 2, what you need to do is to type in the command line interface. To type in, you say switch A hashtag configure terminal. You know, you always start from there. Switch A hashtag configure terminal. Okay, switch A hashtag configure terminal. Then the next one is switch A config hashtag VLAN 2, because now you're creating a new VLAN. So you say switch A hashtag VLAN 2. Remember, we created VLAN 1 before. And then switch A config VLAN, the hashtag name, you name your the VLAN. Sales, you give it a name. Sales means this is a sales department VLAN for sales department people. So you name it. You name VLAN. Then you also want to create VLAN 3 same time simultaneously. So you say switch A config hashtag VLAN 3, and then you go to name it. You say switch A config VLAN hashtag name engineering. So you give it a name. Say the name of this VLAN is engineering. So we move on to the next step. Then we type a show command to show us what we have done, or to exit switch VLAN hashtag exit, meaning you exit the interface after you have you've created this. You exit the interface. Then if you want to see what you have done, you say switch hashtag show VLAN. Once you put hashtag show VLAN, if you run what you have done. So look at the first one. Now you've created VLAN 1, VLAN 2, VLAN 3. Okay, the VLAN 1 is a default one because you didn't give it a name. It's a default one, the one you're using for the administrative department. You see the status is active, and you see all the fast Ethernet port that you've connected to it. VLAN 2 is active, VLAN 3 is engineering and is active. You not assign ports to it. Okay, when you assign the interfaces, they will all show up. Okay, like we've done in the first one. So the next one, in the next step, is the port. The port will be assigned to the newly created VLANs. You can see here the ports are not assigned. You can see here they are blank. Here is blank, no ports. Here is blank, no ports. So after you create the VLANs, VLAN 1 and VLAN 2, which is sales, and VLAN 3, which is engineering, after you created these VLANs, you have to assign ports. So the next step is to assign ports to this new VLAN that you've created. Okay, to assign ports to the newly VLAN that we've created. Now, this will require that the configuration mode be entered, and each fast Ethernet interface port must be assigned to the proper VLAN. You must know the VLAN that you're assigning it to. So you defining each of the VLAN when you are assigning the ports. Example is shown below. For example, you say fast Ethernet interface 0/2 being assigned to VLAN 2. So you define where you are assigning it to, VLAN 2. If not, it will go to VLAN 1. So for example, let's see the configuration, how you run it, the protocol. You say switch hashtag config terminal, that's T, and then you enter the configuration command, each one line by line, and then you end with Control/Z. Now you say switch config hashtag interface fast Ethernet 0/2 switch config interface hashtag switch port mode access, meaning you say you should have access to the switch ports. You are saying that the system should have access to the switch port. Okay, switch port mode access. The next step is switch config interface hashtag switch port access VLAN 2. Now, not only the access now, switch port mode access, you are saying you should access what? VLAN 2. Then you say switch config interface hashtag end. Hashtag end. So you can now also type, if you want to exit, you can put the exit command in the interface. So you type the show VLAN. If you type the show VLAN, it will show you for what you have done. The switch hashtag show VLAN. If you run the default, the first one is the default one. The second one, you run only one interface, one port. So you see, it's showing you the port that you've just put in VLAN 2, which is in sales. Okay. So you open the static. You can open the static VLAN configuration in the Net Challenge software. You use what we call the Net Challenge software. Okay, you can download this one software online, the free one, and try this command on this software and try to see if you have a switch, if you have a Cisco switch, and run all this command and see if you're able to configure the interfaces and test your ability to configure the static VLAN. Okay, you can test your ability, but you use the Net Challenge software. You can download the free version if you have a switch, okay, with you. So that's all we have for configuring switch. The first one was we looked at the configure terminal, we looked at the switch configure hashtag, we looked at the switch configure line, the interface. Okay, so that's all we have for today. Thank you for joining us for today's class. Thank you once again for embracing Western University.